didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there in the middle of my brother's rehearsal dinner, champagne still fizzing in the glass I was holding, and listened to my future sister-in-law tell a room full of people that I had embarrassed the family. The funny thing was, I had paid for that room. I had paid for the champagne too. Let me back up. My name is not important. What matters is that 3 years ago I was 28 years old, newly promoted as senior financial analyst at a private equity firm, making more money than I knew what to do with, and completely alone in the way that only people with difficult families understand. Not lonely. Alone. There's a difference. Lonely is a feeling. Alone is a structure. My brother and I were not close growing up. He was 4 years older, which in childhood terms might as well have been a different species. He had his friends, his football games, his way of moving through the world like it owed him something. I had my books, my part-time job at 16, my quiet determination to get out and make something of myself that didn't depend on anyone else. Our parents divorced when I was 12. Our mother kept the house, the narrative, and my brother. Our father disappeared to Phoenix and sent birthday cards until he didn't. I put myself through college on scholarships and nights waitressing. My brother took community college classes for 3 semesters and then dropped out to figure things out, which in practice meant living at home and letting our mother tell everyone he was in between opportunities. I don't say this to be cruel. I say it because it's the foundation of everything that came after. When I was 25, I got the job, real money, for the first time in my life. And like a lot of people who came from nothing, I didn't quite know how to hold it. I bought myself a decent apartment. I paid off my student loans in 14 months. And then, because my mother called me crying one February about not being able to make the mortgage, I paid that too. Just once, I told myself. Just this once. You already know how this ends. That once became every month. 300 here, 500 there, then 1,000, then 2. My mother never asked directly, she was too smart for that. She would just call and mention things. The water heater. My brother's car insurance. The vet bill for the dog I had never met. And I would transfer the money because it was easier than the alternative, which was listening to her cry and feeling like a bad daughter for the rest of the week. My brother's name is, well, I'll call him what he called himself at the time, the future husband. He got engaged to a woman I'll call his fiancée, though neither title really captures who she was. She was 26, worked part-time at a boutique, and had the kind of confidence that comes not from achievement, but from never having been told no. When they announced the engagement, our mother called me before she called anyone else. Not to share the news, to tell me what the wedding was going to cost. They're thinking 150 guests, she said. Maybe 200. That's a lot of people, I said. You're so good with money, she said. I just think it would mean so much to your brother if you helped. I should have said no. I know that now. I knew it then, honestly, somewhere underneath the part of me that still wanted to be the daughter who came through. The part of me that thought, maybe this time they'll say thank you. Maybe this time they'll see me. I said yes. Over the next 11 months, I paid for the venue deposit, the catering consultation fees, the engagement party at a wine bar in the city, the rehearsal dinner at an Italian restaurant that charged $42 for pasta, the bridesmaid dress alterations for women I had never met, the hotel block for out-of-town guests, and a significant portion of the florist bill, because my soon-to-be sister-in-law had decided at the last minute that peonies were more her aesthetic than roses, and peonies cost 3 times as much. I did not tell my brother the money came from me. My mother handled all of it, which meant my brother thought our mother was handling all of it, which meant he thought money was simply appearing from somewhere vague and maternal and expected. His fiancée knew. My mother had told her early on, in the way that my mother tells people things she wants them to know without wanting to be the one responsible for them knowing. A careful mention, a casual disclosure. His fiancée knew I was paying and she never once acknowledged it, which told me everything I needed to know about the years ahead. The rehearsal dinner was on a Friday in October. The restaurant had a private dining room with exposed brick and candlelight and small ceramic dishes of olives that nobody touched. I wore a green dress I had bought the previous spring. I had done my hair. I had taken a car service there because I didn't want to deal with parking. I was standing near the bar talking to one of my brother's college friends when his fiancée approached me. She was wearing white, not bridal white, just a very deliberate ivory. And she had the look on her face that I had learned to recognize over the past year. The look that meant she had decided something about me. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she said. It was not a question. She walked me slightly away from the group, not so far that we were out of earshot, which I would later understand was intentional. She wanted witnesses. "I just wanted to address something," she said. "My aunt said that you told her, at the engagement party, that you were the one paying for the wedding, that you said it like you wanted credit for it." I felt the champagne go flat in my glass. "I didn't say that," I said. "She remembers it very clearly." "I'm sure she remembers something," I said. "But I didn't say that." "The thing is," she said, and her voice dropped in a way that was somehow louder than full volume, "it's really inappropriate to make our wedding about you. It's embarrassing. It makes the family look like we can't take care of ourselves." I looked at her. I looked at the room. My mother was at a table near the window, not looking at us, which meant she was absolutely watching us. My brother was laughing about something with his groomsmen. The aunt in question was refilling her wine. "I think we should talk about this another time," I said. "I think we should talk about it now," she said, "since you seem to have a habit of making things about money." There were at least 6 people within hearing distance. I could see 2 of them looking. "I'm going to go get some water," I said, and I walked away. I stood in the bathroom for 4 minutes. I know because I counted. I looked at myself in the mirror over the sink, the green dress, the hair I had done, the face I had arranged into something calm, and I thought about the 11 months of transfers, the venue deposit, the peonies. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone in February 3 years ago. Just this once. I dried my hands and walked back out. The dinner went fine, technically. I ate the pasta. I gave a toast that I had written myself, that was warm and genuine, and said nothing about money. My brother hugged me afterward and said I was the best. The way he said things that didn't cost him anything. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a glass of water, and I opened my online banking portal, and I looked at everything I had sent over 11 months. I made a spreadsheet. I had not looked at the total number all at once before. When I added it up, I sat very still for a moment. Then I started making a list. I did not act immediately. That's important to understand. What I did was methodical, and methodical takes time. The first thing I did was call my mother the next morning, the day of the wedding, and have a conversation that I kept very calm and very clear. I told her that I had been thinking about my financial commitments to the family. I told her that I would be stepping back from covering the monthly expenses she had been relying on, effective the following month. I told her I loved her, and that this wasn't about punishment, it was about sustainability. She cried. She said I was being selfish. She said I was ruining everything on the most important day. I said I would talk to her more after the wedding, and I hung up. The wedding was beautiful. I will give it that. The venue was everything she had wanted. The flowers were peonies. My brother cried when he saw his bride at the end of the aisle, and it was genuine, I think, the way some feelings are genuine even when the people having them are not particularly good people. I sat in my row and watched and felt something complicated that I don't have a clean word for. At the reception, his wife found me near the dessert table. "I want to apologize for last night," she said, in the tone of someone who does not apologize. "It's fine," I said, because I had already decided that I was not going to do this here. "I just think going forward, we should be clear about boundaries," she said. "We don't want to feel indebted." I looked at her for a moment. "You won't," I said. "I promise." She smiled like she had won something. The following 4 weeks were, from the outside, uneventful. I had 3 conversations with my mother in that time. I sent no transfers. She mentioned the mortgage twice. I said I was sorry to hear that and asked if she had spoken to the bank about refinancing options. At week 5, I got a text from my brother. He said, "Mom mentioned you're not helping out anymore. What's going on?" I called him back. "I'm not covering the household expenses anymore," I said. "I should have had this conversation sooner, but I've been covering Mom's mortgage, utilities, and various other costs for about 3 years." I need to stop. There was a long pause. I didn't know you were doing that, he said. I know, I said. Another pause. So what is she supposed to do? He said. I think that's a conversation you two should have, I said. You're both adults. He hung up. Within 48 hours, his wife had left a voicemail telling me that I was being vindictive and small, and that she hoped I was proud of myself for punishing the family over a few comments she had made when she was stressed about the wedding. I did not call back. What I did instead was more useful. I had been, over the previous weeks, quietly reviewing every financial account I'd set up in connection with my family. My mother's mortgage assistance had run through a direct transfer I had set up years ago, which I had already canceled. But there was also a credit card, a supplementary card on my account that I had added from my mother approximately 2 years ago for emergencies, that had become, in practice, a general lifestyle card. I pulled up the statement. I looked at the charges. A spa appointment. Several restaurant meals, a weekend hotel stay in a city 3 hours away that I had not been told about. I called the credit card company and removed the supplementary card. My mother called me 40 minutes later from what sounded like a parking lot. My card was declined, she said. I know, I said. I removed it from my account. You can't just do that, she said. I need that card. It's my account, I said. And I can. After everything I've done for you, she said, and I felt the familiar tug of that sentence, the way it had always worked on me, the way it was designed to work on me. I love you, I said, but I'm not able to keep funding things I can't afford and didn't agree to. I hope you understand. She did not understand. She made that clear in approximately 12 more minutes of conversation, which I listened to without saying much, and then I said goodbye and ended the call. My brother's wife took to social media, not explicitly about me. She was too smart for that. But she posted things, vague things, about people who pretend to be generous but are really just buying power, about family members who abandon you when you need them most. Her followers, who were not my followers, left supportive comments. I was told about these posts by someone who thought I should know. I read them once. Then I did something I had been putting off. I called a woman I had been working with for about a year, a forensic accountant who did work adjacent to some of my firm's portfolio companies. I had kept her card. I asked her if she had capacity for a personal matter. She did. I had, over the previous months, become aware of something that I had been not quite looking at for some time. My mother's house, the house whose mortgage I had been paying, was not, it turned out, in the kind of financial distress she had described. What it was encumbered. There were 2 lines of credit taken against the property that I had not known about, taken out approximately 18 months apart, both of them in amounts that did not correspond to any home improvement or necessity I could identify. My brother's name was on the second one. I asked the accountant to look more carefully. What she found over the following 6 weeks was a picture that I would describe as a sustained and coordinated effort to present a financial hardship that did not fully exist, in order to extract consistent funding from a family member who could be relied upon to provide it if she believed it was needed. That's the formal way to put it. The informal way is, they had been lying to me for years. I did not confront them. I want to be clear about that. Confrontation, in my experience, produces noise and no resolution. What I did instead was documentation. I compiled everything: transfers, dates, amounts, the credit card statements, the property records, the lines of credit, my accountant's summary. I organized it into a folder that was coherent and dated and easy to understand. I sent a copy to a lawyer. I also, and this was the part that took me the longest to decide, wrote a letter. Not to my brother, not to his wife, to my mother. I wrote it by hand, which I hadn't done since college, because I wanted her to know that I had meant every word of it. I told her that I was not angry, which was mostly true. I told her that I understood why she had done it, which was completely true and which was also the saddest part. I told her that I was not going to pursue any legal remedy unless she made that necessary. I told her that I was closing the door on the financial relationship between us and opening, if she wanted it, a different kind of door, one that didn't have a dollar amount attached to it. I sent the letter certified mail so I would know when she had received it. I don't know if she read it the day it arrived or later. She didn't respond for 11 days. When she called, she didn't say much, just that she had gotten my letter and that she needed some time. I said, okay, I meant it. My brother called me 2 days after that. He was not quiet the way our mother was quiet. He said things that I'm not going to repeat here because they don't deserve the space. I listened until I didn't need to anymore, and then I said, I hope you and your wife are well, and I hung up. His wife's social media posts stopped approximately 3 weeks after the lawyer's letter was sent. A letter that did nothing except note, in formal language, that certain financial documentation had been retained, and that any further defamatory public statements would be met with appropriate response. I am told this is sometimes called a cease and desist. My lawyer called it a very polite piece of paper that tends to work. It worked. I'm telling you this now from a place that feels, for the first time in a long time, like my own. My apartment is quiet on Sunday mornings. I make coffee before 8, and I sit at the table by the window, and I don't check my phone right away. I have a savings account that grows at a rate I find satisfying. I have friendships that I had let go somewhat distant while I was consumed with all of this, and I have been tending to them the way you tend to plants. You forgot to water, carefully, without assuming they'll survive, but hoping. My mother and I talk sometimes, not often. When we do, it's careful in the way that some things are careful. Not cold, just honest. I do not send her money. I do not feel guilty about not sending her money, which took longer to arrive at than I expected. My brother and I do not talk. I think about him occasionally, not with anger, but with something more like grief, for the version of a relationship I always wanted and never actually had. Maybe that will change. Maybe it won't. I have stopped deciding how it's supposed to go. What I know is this. The money I was spending was not buying love. It was buying the performance of love, which is a very different and much more expensive thing. The silence I received in return for all of it was not ingratitude, it was information. It was people telling me, in the way that people tell you things without words, exactly who they were and what I was to them. I was an ATM with feelings, which was convenient for everyone except me. The moment I stopped. The moment I stood in my own kitchen at midnight with a spreadsheet and a glass of water and finally looked at the real number, was not dramatic. It did not feel like power. It felt like standing up after sitting in an uncomfortable position for so long that you had stopped noticing the pain. The relief, when it came, was so ordinary that it surprised me. That's the thing nobody tells you about finally choosing yourself. It doesn't feel like revenge. It doesn't feel like victory. It just feels like breathing. And after a long time of not quite getting enough air, that is more than enough. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long. Not the leaving. The leaving was the easy part, once I finally did it. What took so long was the believing. Believing that the arrangement made sense. Believing that if I just kept showing up, kept transferring the money, kept writing the toasts and attending the dinners and swallowing what I actually felt, eventually something would shift. They would see me, not as a resource, as a person. That shift never came, and I think, if I'm honest, I knew that earlier than I let myself admit. Here's what I've come to understand about the way I lived for those 3 years. I was not being generous. I was being afraid. Generosity is freely given with no expectation attached to it. What I was doing had expectations sewn into every transfer. I just never said them out loud, even to myself. I expected to be seen. I expected to matter. I expected that money, given quietly and consistently, would eventually translate into the kind of love I had wanted from my family since I was 12 years old, and my father drove away and nobody seemed to notice that I was the one standing in the driveway. That's not generosity. That's a transaction disguised as love. And I was the only one who didn't know it was a transaction. My brother's wife said I had a habit of making things about money. She said it in front of witnesses, at a dinner I had paid for, in a room I had booked. And the thing is, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had made everything about money, just not in the way she meant. I had made money the currency of belonging. I had decided, somewhere along the way, that if I paid enough, I would eventually be owed a seat at the table. You can't buy a seat at a table where you were never really wanted. You can only fund one. What the spreadsheet showed me that night at my kitchen table, the real number finally in front of me, was not just a dollar amount. It was a record of every time I had chosen their comfort over my own clarity. Every time I had transferred money instead of having the honest conversation. Every time I had told myself that keeping the peace was the same thing as keeping a relationship. It isn't. Peace that costs you your self-respect is not peace. It's just silence with a price tag. The hardest part of all of this was not cutting off the credit card or stopping the mortgage payments, or even sending my mother that letter. The hardest part was sitting with the grief of it afterward, because once I stopped performing the role of family ATM, I had to confront the fact that, without that role, there wasn't much of a relationship left to grieve. And that loss, the loss of the thing you always wanted but never actually had, is its own particular kind of ache. I won't pretend I arrived at clarity quickly, I didn't. But I got there. And where I landed was this: the people who only stay when you're funding their lives are not people who love you. They are people who love what you provide. Those are very different things. And knowing the difference is not bitterness, it's wisdom. The kind that costs something to learn and is worth every penny. I chose myself, not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly at a kitchen table at midnight with a glass of water and a spreadsheet that told me the truth I had been avoiding. That was enough.